can really become such good friends with someone that they feel like family. You know their grandparents, you know their history. Whereas in the United States, I think it's much easier to quickly befriend someone, but it's...
Olá pessoal, sejam bem-vindos a mais um vídeo desse canal. Nós somos cidadãos do terceiro mundo e nesse canal nós reagimos e aprendemos sobre o primeiro mundo. Nesse vídeo nós vamos reagir a por que os holandeses são pessoas mais saudáveis, 10 anos de observação de um holandês americano.
Portanto, aproveite a oportunidade e considere se inscrever no nosso canal, clique no gostei, compartilhe esse vídeo e visite nosso Instagram para fazer mais sugestões de conteúdos como esse. E agora, vamos para a reação.
When I first moved to Amsterdam in my early 20s, I was confused. Dutch people look so happy and healthy, yet I also saw many of them drinking beers, teens, smoking cigarettes, and no one seemed to have any special diet plan. Coming from the US, health to me meant eating superfoods and going to the gym, abstaining from bad things. I didn't understand how people could be healthy without this American approach. Now, 10 years later, I've come to understand why Dutch people, on the whole, are relatively healthy. And today, I'm sharing the Dutch lifestyle habits that I believe we can all learn from to live longer, healthier lives. Let's get started. This video is sponsored by Peak. Hey guys, it's Robin and welcome to the Science of Self-Care. On this channel, we talk about health science, we talk about life philosophy, and we do a whole lot of self-care experimentation. So a little context for today's video. I am half Dutch, half American. My mom is Dutch, my father's American. I myself have lived in the United States for 20 years and I've lived in the Netherlands for 10 years. Over my lifetime, I feel like I've really gotten to know both cultures so intimately. I've lived the daily life in both countries. And this video is a little bit of a reflection on what I've noticed in terms of cultural norms and cultural habits that I believe keep the Netherlands a relatively healthy country. The Netherlands on average has a longer life expectancy. They're less likely to develop diabetes or become obese. So if we look at public health stats, the Netherlands is a relatively healthy country. For those of you who don't know, earlier this year I moved back to the United States after living in the Netherlands for 10 years, and there's certain Dutch things that I would like to bring with me in this new chapter of life to make sure I continue to feel good and to live a healthy, balanced life as I define it. Keep in mind, this video is based on personal observations. I do have some data thrown in here and there, but a lot of this is just a little op-ed reflection. All right, enough rambling from me. Let's get straight into it. So the first thing that I have noticed in the Netherlands is there seems to be less black and white thinking about health. Trendy diets are less likely to be popular. Dutch people are kind of think health is simple, you know, eat enough but not too much, and you can indulge here or there as long as you're not eating too much, and make sure you eat your fruits and vegetables. Health is a very intuitive and more simplified thing to Dutch people, and in Dutch culture I see more of a practice of moderation than really rigid rules about these foods are healthy, these foods are unhealthy, do and don't do this. Granted, this varies widely across families and people, but it's something overall I've noticed people are more likely to indulge in moderation, but then also practice an overall very healthy way of living. The next thing I've noticed.
Isso que ela falou é muito interessante porque é uma coisa que a gente já comenta, tipo, os holandeses eles conseguem ter esse equilíbrio, né? Então não vai ser diferente nessa parte também da vida deles, né?
Sim, é verdade. E, inclusive, você mencionou algo muito interessante, que é uma observação que a gente já faz desde que a gente começou a reagir aos vídeos aqui no canal. Então, a gente percebe que os holandeses eles têm uma qualidade em termos de alimentação que é surpreendente.
In the Netherlands is how important social relationships are. Your social life is a big part of your identity in the Netherlands, and I think that's much less the case in the United States. In the United States, I feel like my American identity is much more tied to my work, my career, my professional achievements, and that's something that starts very early on in school. You're kind of training to go to university, and then success is measured in status and in money, and that I think is less so in the Netherlands. People are more identifying with their social relationships. Socializing is such an important part of people's lives, and I think this is overall quite a healthy thing. Personally, in the United States, as an adult, I find it quite hard to make friends. I think a lot of social interactions feel kind of networking or transactional, or they're going to be related to work. which I don't really mind, but in the Netherlands, it feels like friendships have nothing to do with your work. There's nothing to do with what can I bring to the table, or what is this person offering me? How is this relationship going to help me get ahead? None of that plays into it. It's just, do I like hanging out with this person? Am I going to invest in this relationship for the long term? That's another thing. In the Netherlands, it takes a long time to become someone's friend, but over time and over years and decades, you can really become such good friends with someone that they feel like family. You know their grandparents, you know their history. Whereas in the United States, I think it's much easier to quickly befriend someone, but it's really a little bit harder to get that depth. Say what you will about the differences, I think both have pros and cons, but the fact that social relationships are a priority in the Netherlands, I think overall is a plus to the health of the population. There's a lot of studies to show that social fulfillment is related to health outcomes. It changes the way we behave, it changes our physiology. Elderly people who are cohabiting are likely to live longer than elderly people who live alone. These little things just remind us that we are inherently social beings. And I say that as an introvert. We still need social connection, and that's something I want to bring into my American chapter of life.
Isso é muito interessante porque ela fala uma coisa que é muito bonito deles, né? Porque, tipo, é uma coisa que é construída, uma relação ali. E você vai construindo isso e você vai tornando isso mais sólido. E é como ela falou, você vai construindo algo com mais profundidade. E isso é uma coisa linda, porque isso mostra uma honestidade e um empenho, né, para fazer isso funcionar de uma maneira muito saudável. Mas o que ela fala é interessante porque nos Estados Unidos, essa parte de você fazer amizade mais rápido e não ter essa profundidade acontece no Brasil também. A gente vê que muitas pessoas são mais abertas, mas tem um limite, né, dessa abertura. Não é uma coisa assim tão profunda, não é uma regra, nem todos vão agir assim, mas infelizmente é uma coisa que acontece. Mas eu gosto muito do jeito como os holandeses lidam nessa área também.
Next thing I've noticed about Dutch society is a big one. Exercise and movement is so deeply integrated into daily life. And what I mean by this is that you cannot help walk and bike in the Netherlands every single day, because often taking a car somewhere is going to take longer and be less convenient than biking there, than walking and taking public transit. So you're just forced to move. You can't get around it. And I think overall that is such a key part of why Dutch people are relatively healthy and fit. They're moving all the time, and it's very interesting whenever I spend time in the Netherlands. I effortlessly am walking 10,000 steps or 20,000 steps a day, whereas in the United States, I can still hit those step goals, but I have to do so very consciously. I have to manually build it into my life. I have to go for walks. I set up a treadmill desk here at home, which really helps, but I will consciously make a concerted effort to walk to the grocery store, to walk to my local cafe. And it's hard because most of the United States is such a car-heavy culture that you need to take your car to many places. So I'm just very conscious about working in those little micro movements into my day. Whenever I can, taking an extra walk around the block, that helps so much.
Em nosso país é muito parecido com os Estados Unidos. Aqui usamos muito carro para ir para tudo quanto é lugar, e enquanto isso na Holanda você desenvolve isso de uma maneira muito diferente, muito mais integrada, urbanisticamente, além de ficar um design muito bonito, e a gente já reagiu sobre isso aqui no canal. Mas é importante manter a saúde, porque quando você usa uma bicicleta ou caminha, você está também praticando exercícios.
É verdade, mas essa questão da urbanização também faz toda a diferença, né? Tipo, isso é uma coisa que foi planejada para eles viverem, né? Eles terem esse estilo de vida. Então, você vê que realmente tem uma preocupação sobre isso. Enquanto no nosso país, a gente é o contrário, né? As coisas são feitas justamente para você pensar em comprar um carro, algo desse tipo.
Next thing I've noticed that is very important in Dutch culture is sleep and getting enough sleep. Again, going back to the United States, being so focused on work, I think also because it is less of a socialist country, people are really struggling economically. There's more of a wealth disparity between the really rich and the very poor in the United States. And that means a lot of people are working very hard to make ends meet. They have multiple jobs. So I don't always think it's possible for everyone to get a perfect 8 hours of sleep. But I also think there's another cultural layer of this hustle mindset, and that it's glorified to wake up at 4 or 5 a.m. and to do a bunch of things before the day has even started. And I see why that is so impactful. I honestly love waking up early. I do it every so often because it feels good. When I was living in New York before I moved to Amsterdam, it was very common for me to wake up at 5 a.m. and go on a run before work. And now when I think back, I think that was cutting so much into my sleep, and overall I think it may have been a detriment to my health, because sleep is just such an important pillar to having a healthy body and a healthy mind. Sleep impacts us in so many ways. If you haven't read the book Outlive by Dr. Peter Attia, I highly recommend reading it. He dedicates a large portion of this book to sleep because sleep is so important. It influences our blood sugar regulation, our appetite, our mood, our overall hormonal balance. If we are continuing to deprioritize sleep and to not get enough of it, or to get poor quality sleep, it's going to greatly impact our health and our risk of chronic diseases. So I think Dutch people do a great job of sleeping, and part of that has to do with there's no guilt with sleeping in. There's no feeling of I'm being lazy if I sleep enough. And sometimes I do get that feeling in the United States. If you are sleeping too much, you're not working hard enough, you're lazy, when I think that's really not a helpful mindset. So with the blessing of Dutch culture, I'm going to continue to prioritize sleep, not wake up at crazy hours if it's not necessary, and to just not feel lazy if I'm sleeping a lot. Quickly.
Eu fico realmente impressionado que a gente encontra algumas pessoas dos Estados Unidos e elas fazem relatos do estilo de vida delas, e eu me impressiono como é muito parecido com o que a gente tem em nosso país.
É verdade, é muito parecido. Eu também fico impressionada com isso. E isso só reforça mesmo como são hábitos muito diferentes, né? Culturas realmente totalmente diferentes, tanto da nossa cultura com a Europa quanto com os Estados Unidos. Porém, a gente acaba pegando algumas coisas que são vistas como aspectos negativos, né?
Little intermission. I just got back from a month in the Netherlands. I actually got married. Woo! The next thing I've really noticed in the Netherlands is the difference in portion size. In general, on average, food portions when you go out to eat or go out to get a dessert are going to be smaller in the Netherlands versus the United States. Obviously, it can differ from establishment to establishment, but things like the Cheesecake Factory just don't exist in the Netherlands. When you go out to eat in the Netherlands, you are expected to eat what you can and then the rest will be thrown away. In the United States, there's almost this expectation that to get your money's worth, you need to be able to take food home and take a doggy bag of leftovers, which means that these portions are so big, I often inevitably end up eating more than is comfortable. And that's something I really notice if I go out to eat in the Netherlands. I have a smaller portion, I eat it, I'm satisfied but not overly full, and if I'm still hungry later, can go get a little dessert, but I'm never feeling so weighed down, and I'm often walking back from dinner. Whereas in the United States, I have often gone out to dinner, eaten too much to the point that I am stuffed and I don't really feel good. Then we get in the car, drive home, and go lay on the couch to kind of survive the food coma, which is such a strange way to eat out, because eating out should be social, it should be fun, it should be pleasant, and yet I've often eaten out in the United States and found myself feeling less comfortable afterwards. So I'm really going to work on being mindful when I'm at a restaurant, and if possible, sharing dishes with friends. I think it's really fun if everyone gets different dishes and you can kind of build your own plate. That is the perfect portion of different things. It's satisfying to try different things, and it also means you can build your plate with portions that feel good and then take home whatever you guys don't eat. So I think sharing plates is a great way to mitigate how much you're eating and to make sure you feel good after you eat out. Related to food, another thing I've noticed is that simple home-cooked meals eaten at a specific time with your family is a Dutch staple. I grew up always having to be home at 6 o'clock for dinner because my parents are both culturally quite Dutch. And I thought that was so crazy because many of my friends didn't have to be home for dinner. It was kind of a do what you want, in and out of the house. There's food in the fridge if you want it, feed yourself. This very flexible mindset. And as a teenager, I just wanted to hang out with my friends. I didn't want to have to go home for dinner. But now looking back, I'm so appreciative of this habit of coming home, eating a family dinner together of really simple home-cooked foods. And I know the Netherlands is not known for its cuisine. And I think that's because food in the Netherlands is very functional, it's practical, it's viewed as fuel rather than something to be made into a culinary masterpiece. Dutch meals, in their simplicity, can often be quite healthy. For example, this is a very classic Dutch dinner, stamppot, which is potatoes and kale mashed together with a simple sausage. There's protein, there's some carbs, there's vegetables. There's also this meal, which is the most classic Dutch lunch. This is what my grandfather eats. It's just a boterham met beleg, a piece of brown hearty bread, not with a lot of sugar like in the United States, but just brown bread with a piece of cheese on top, and then an apple or some hand fruit or a tomato that my grandfather will basically eat like an apple, literally just a tomato like that. But you know, again, this is relatively healthy in its simplicity, and I think there is something to be said about food is first and foremost fuel for our body, and I like that mindset. I don't have kids now, but I hope that when I do have a bigger family, I can continue to have these very simple family meals where we're coming together at the table, sharing about our day, and fueling our bodies with nourishing food. Another thing I've noticed about Dutch culture that is kind of a double-edged sword is the direct communication and cultural pressure to be a certain way. The reason I'm mentioning this is that I think it plays a large role in health. If you are not taking care of your body, you're not working out, you're having health issues, your Dutch friends will comment on that and they'll call you out and they will hold you accountable. They will say, maybe you should exercise more, maybe you should eat less. They will be very direct with you and say that. Whereas American culture, that's very taboo. You're not ever supposed to comment on anyone else's way of living, anyone else's way of being. And I really like that in the United States, you can be whoever you want to be, and that's celebrated. At the same time, I do think there's something valuable about telling your loved ones if you're concerned about their health. I know this can quickly get very toxic, so I'm not really sure how I feel about this. What I am going to take away from this Dutch cultural way of being is that I'm going to make sure to remind people in my life that they can always be very honest with me. I prefer very direct communication, and I think it's not only helpful in hearing people's feedback about your behavior and how you're making them feel, but it's also just easier to become close to people when you know how they actually feel, versus sometimes in the United States, I don't always know exactly how people feel. You really have to read between the lines. This direct Dutch communication also results in just a larger cultural pressure to stay fit and to take care of your body, because if you don't, people will call you out and they'll tell you about it. And that's not something I necessarily agree with. Something I will personally never do is comment on the way another person looks. I don't think that's anyone's place. Different than looks though, if someone in your family is kind of not taking care of their body and being a bit self-destructive in their lifestyle, I do think that's something that I would want to be called out on. So, I don't know. This is all food for thought. Pun
Isso é interessante. Eu acho que essa questão que ela fala sobre falar sobre o corpo de outra pessoa, acho que talvez esteja ligado realmente a essa questão da honestidade que eles têm, né? Sobre ser direto. Aqui no Brasil, as pessoas não tendem muito a ser diretas, né? Tipo, depende, né, do que é considerado como direto aqui, mas eu acho que depende também, né, se é uma pessoa próxima de você for falar alguma coisa, eu sinceramente prefiro que as pessoas lidem comigo de forma honesta e direta, que dessa forma é tão prático que você não perde nem o seu tempo também, né? Nem ela perde o dela também.
O que eu percebo que em nosso país, os brasileiros, eles parecem não saber lidar muito com críticas ou algo do tipo.
So all in all, what have I taken away from my 10 years of living in the Netherlands? Firstly, I'm going to really work on being less rigid about how I conceptualize health, less black and white thinking. I'm going to make sure I prioritize sleep and social interactions and think of health very holistically. It's not just exercising and nutrition. What are all these other elements of health? I'm also going to continue to be mindful of the portions that I have at restaurants. Just make sure I'm not feeling uncomfortable when I eat out. I'm going to continue to try to cook home-cooked meals with kind of whole foods, simple ingredients. Recognizing that food is first and foremost a way that we can fuel our body is, to me, a helpful way to think about food. I like this Dutch practicality. I'm also going to continue to weave movement into my daily life. I'm not going to succumb to car culture. I'm going to try my best to just keep stepping every day. Even if that means I spend a lot of time on my treadmill desk, I think it's so important to move our bodies throughout the day. Some of these things can sound kind of extreme, like getting a treadmill desk, but if you think about the quality of life and how much longer you're going to be able to live when you take care of your body today, I don't think it's extreme. I think it's so worth it. Life is precious. It goes by in a blip. I just want to take care of this precious body, and that's a large reason why I started this channel. So just continue to fall in love with taking care of our bodies. So just to nuance this video a tiny bit and not give the impression that one country is better than another, every place has its pros and cons. So many mountains, forests, prairies across this country, and it just makes for really great places to hike, to play, to camp. All of these things make me feel happy and healthy. I would love to know if there's something that you have taken away from another culture or another country on your travels. Are there other health habits that have made an impact on you that maybe you didn't grow up with, but you've kind of observed through traveling or through reading or through perhaps having friends from different cultures? Share down below. I absolutely love having discussions with you guys in the comment section. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time.
Uau, realmente fantástico. Não me surpreende mais, talvez me surpreendesse no início, mas a Holanda realmente é um país incrível e a gente consegue ver como é a educação holandesa no que se refere aos comportamentos sociais em relação ao que você vai comer, sobre como você vai levar o seu modo de vida, o fato de eles priorizarem muito o descanso e o sono, isso realmente é fantástico e a gente consegue perceber como isso é uma atmosfera que as pessoas vão até a Holanda e se integram a isso de uma maneira tão incrível que estas mesmas pessoas ficam impressionadas com isso.
É verdade, isso que você falou faz sentido, tipo, essa atmosfera ela é tão forte que as pessoas chegam lá e é impossível você não ser sugado por isso, né? Realmente é uma coisa incrível. E essa praticidade que eles têm, você vê que a gente ouve, né, as pessoas comentando isso em vários vídeos. Então, realmente é verdade, é uma coisa fantástica. Eu realmente fico impressionado porque é uma cultura muito diferente da nossa, mas tem uns aspectos assim que eles precisam ser levados adiante porque são coisas muito positivas, né? Então, a gente olha, a gente observa isso e a gente precisa absorver porque são coisas muito boas, né? São coisas realmente que vão fazer evoluir. Isso é fantástico.
Não, realmente é incrível, mas essa foi a reação desse vídeo e, portanto, aproveite a oportunidade, considere se inscrever no nosso canal, clique no gostei, compartilhe esse vídeo e visite o nosso Instagram para fazer mais sugestões de conteúdos como esse.
Muito obrigada por assistir esse vídeo e nos vemos na próxima reação.
Tchau!